Imagine finding out the police officer you trusted to protect your family has been quietly working against you the entire time. Now imagine that officer is meant to be one of the good guys on Weatherfield's cobbles. That is exactly the storm brewing on Coronation Street right now, and fans are no longer sitting quietly on the sidelines. They are picking teams, they are demanding answers, and they want DC Kit Green held accountable before this war, with Gary Windass spirals completely out of control. If you have been anywhere near Coronation Street social media over the past few weeks, you'll have seen it. Timelines packed with furious viewers, comment sections turning into full-blown debates, and a single question dominating it all. Whose side are you actually on, Gary's or Kit's? What started as a builder's yard bust-up has snowballed into one of the most talked-about conflicts on the cobbles this year, and the fandom is refusing to let it go quietly. For anyone who has drifted away from Weatherfield lately, here is the quick catch-up. Gary Windass, played by Mikey North, is one of the street's most enduring figures, a man who has clawed his way through business failures, criminal entanglements, and personal tragedy since arriving on our screens back in 2008. These days, he runs the builder's yard and shares a home with his wife Maria Connor, played by Samia Longchambon, along with her son Liam. Gary is no angel himself. His history is littered with dodgy dealings and hot-headed decisions, but viewers have always understood him as someone who, underneath the chaos, is fiercely protective of the people he loves. Standing opposite him is Kit Green, played by Jacob Roberts, a detective constable whose badge is supposed to represent law and order in Weatherfield. Kit's story has taken viewers through plenty of twists already, from his complicated bond with his birth mother Bernie Winter, to a paternity storyline involving troubled teenager Brody Michaelis, to his own past cover-ups that have repeatedly put his career on the line. Kit has always walked a blurry line between doing the right thing and bending the rules to protect the people closest to him. That blurry line is exactly what has now dragged him into direct conflict with Gary. The trouble began when Mick Michaelis, a violent and manipulative figure who has been terrorizing the Windass and Connor household, locked Maria's son Liam in a shed at the builder's yard, causing the teenager to miss an important exam. Gary and Maria were understandably livid, and when Gary confronted Mick, things turned physical. Mick struck first, and Gary, bottle in hand, was ready to retaliate. That is the moment Kit stepped in, not to arrest Mick, but to stop Gary and let Mick walk away scot-free. For Gary and Maria, this was the final straw. They could not understand why a police officer would so blatantly protect a known troublemaker like Mick while treating Gary as the villain. It only got worse from there. Kit turned up to warn Gary that Mick had filed a complaint accusing him of false imprisonment, then denied ever witnessing Gary getting punched. He went as far as threatening Gary with arrest if he did not back off. An incensed Gary described Kit as being so corrupt he would put a professional gymnast to shame, and the pair began digging for a way to expose him, turning to fellow Officer Craig Tinker for help figuring out how to report Kit's conduct. That is when the show pulled back the curtain on exactly why Kit has been protecting Mick all along. A dedicated flashback special transported viewers to 2007, revealing the tangled teenage history between Kit, Mick, and Mick's sister Lou Michaelis. In those flashback scenes, a young Kit talked Mick into pushing a lit firework through a shopkeeper's letterbox, sparking a fire that injured the shopkeeper's wife. Mick took the fall and was sent away to a secure training center, while Kit ran and was never punished, going on to build a respectable career in the police force. It turns out Mick has known this secret for years and has been using it as leverage over Kit ever since, which explains why Kit has bent over backwards to shield him no matter the cost to Gary and Maria. Naturally, this revelation has only intensified the fan debate rather than settling it. Viewers have been flooding social media and soap forums with reactions, and the split is genuinely fascinating to watch unfold. One camp firmly backs Gary, arguing that regardless of his own murky past, he is the one trying to protect his family from a genuinely dangerous man, while Kit is meant to be upholding the law and instead is actively enabling a criminal to terrorize an entire household. These fans want to see Gary vindicated, Kit stripped of his badge, and Mick finally facing consequences for everything he has done. The other camp has a bit more sympathy for Kit, pointing to his troubled backstory and the genuine bind he has been placed in by Mick's blackmail. These viewers argue that Kit is a flawed, human character being manipulated rather than a straightforwardly bad cop, and that the show is doing exactly what good soap writing should do, making you understand a character's choices even when you cannot condone them. Still, even within this camp, patience is wearing thin, and there is a growing consensus that Kit cannot keep hiding behind his badge forever. What really seems to be uniting fans across both sides of the divide is a shared demand for accountability. Across comment threads and reaction videos, viewers keep circling back to the same point. They want to see real, lasting consequences for Kit rather than another quiet resolution where he slips out of trouble unscathed. Given how many times Kit has narrowly avoided exposure in previous storylines, from his handling of his half-sister Gemma's legal troubles to darker cover-ups involving other characters entirely, fans are understandably skeptical that this latest scandal will actually stick. There is a real appetite among the fanbase for the show to finally make Kit pay a proper price, whether that means losing his job, facing criminal charges of his own, or being publicly humiliated in front of the whole street. Soap outlets covering the story have echoed much of this fan energy, framing the standoff as one of the more compelling slow-burn conflicts Coronation Street has running at the moment, precisely because it refuses to offer an easy hero and villain. Gary is far from perfect. His own track record includes plenty of questionable decisions, and that moral grayness is part of what makes this feud so gripping. It is not simply good versus evil. It is two deeply flawed men colliding, with Maria, Bernie, and the wider Windass and Michaela's families caught in the crossfire. So, where does this leave things going forward? With Mick still holding that fireworks secret over Kit's head, the tension is unlikely to ease anytime soon. Kit is essentially trapped, forced to keep protecting the very man causing chaos for people he otherwise seems to care about, all to keep his own past buried. That is a pressure cooker situation that soap writers rarely let simmer for long without an explosion. Many fans are speculating that Gary and Maria's investigation, with Craig Tinker's help, could be the thread that finally starts unraveling Kit's cover story, especially if Craig starts connecting dots between Kit's behavior and his increasingly suspicious relationship with Mick. There is also plenty of chatter about what this means for Kit's long-term future on the cobbles. Corrie has shown before that it is willing to put this character through the ringer, and if the writers decide the walls are finally closing in for good, it could mean anything from a dramatic public unmasking to Kit finally being forced to choose between his career and protecting the truth. Given how many storylines have already tied his fate to Mick, Lou, and now this decades-old cover-up, there is a real sense that Weatherfield is building toward a reckoning rather than another temporary reprieve. For Gary, meanwhile, this conflict could end up reinforcing exactly what fans have always loved about him, his willingness to go to the wall for the people he loves, even when the odds and the law itself seem stacked against him. Whether that translates into him exposing Kit through legitimate channels or taking matters into his own hands, in typical Gary Windass fashion, remains to be seen, and it is exactly that uncertainty that has viewers so hooked. To sum it all up, Coronation Street has found itself in the middle of a genuinely divisive storyline, with Gary Windass and DC Kit Green locked in an escalating standoff rooted in old secrets, present-day blackmail, and a fandom that is done watching corrupt behavior go unpunished. Fans have made their demand loud and clear. They want real consequences for Kit, not another narrow escape, and they are watching closely to see whether the show will finally deliver the reckoning this storyline has been building toward. That is where things stand for now, but with Mick's grip on Kit tightening and Gary and Maria closing in, this feels far from over. What do you think should happen next? Should Kit finally be exposed and lose everything, or is there more to his story that deserves sympathy? Let us know exactly where you stand in the comments below. If you enjoyed this breakdown, be sure to like the video and subscribe for more Coronation Street news, spoilers, and updates delivered straight to you.